à quel point les allégations d'ingérence dans les élections canadiennes par la Chine doivent préoccuper les Canadiens?
Oh, c'est très préoccupant. C'est quelque chose, je sais que nos services de sécurité prennent au sérieux et on doit, évidemment, on doit se concentrer là-dessus. Un instant. Oui, prenez votre soupe. Je suis moins en forme qu'avant. C'est le mois de décembre, mais mon Dieu. Avec les escaliers. OK. Donc, un suivi.
Si préoccupant ça, est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas savoir c'était qui les candidats?
C'est quelque chose qu'on devrait regarder avec nos agences de sécurité, mais je peux vous dire qu'on est très préoccupés sans trop dire, mais il faut faire quelque chose.
Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose d'illégal qui a été fait? Vous êtes ministre de la Justice, quelque chose d'illégal qui a été fait? Est-ce qu'il ne devrait pas y avoir des poursuites contre ces gens-là?
On verra.
Devrait-il savoir qui sont ces 11 candidats?
Comme j'ai dit, il y a des questions. Quand c'est question de la sécurité nationale, il faut agir avec prudence et donc il faut travailler avec nos services de sécurité.
But don't you think Canadians have the
Yeah.
right for transparency on this if their elections indeed have been interfered?
Yes, it's a serious issue. We know it's a serious issue. We take it seriously. Our security services take it seriously. When you're dealing with matters of national security, you have to move in a very prudent fashion. Obviously, there's a need for transparency, but there's also a need for our security services to protect their sources, to protect the methods in which they gather intelligence. All of that is important, and so we need to act prudently.
Sur l'article 21, l'étude article par article qui se passe, il y a beaucoup de demandes d'amendement. Est-ce que c'est encore réaliste pour vous d'amender ce projet de loi-là, notamment sur la notion de drapeau rouge qui a été critiquée là, par des groupes de protection des femmes elles-mêmes?
Oui. Écoutez, évidemment, le processus devant le comité est très important dans l'évolution d'un projet de loi. Évidemment, nous sommes à l'écoute. On avait proposé un régime de drapeau rouge justement pour aider à protéger certaines personnes vulnérables dans des contextes difficiles. On est à l'écoute. On n'est jamais fermé. On n'est jamais fermé à des solutions ou des suggestions qui ont été faites en bonne foi.
Mais ce qu'ils disent, c'est que ça donne un fardeau très grand pour des victimes de violences conjugales d'utiliser ce drapeau rouge-là, cette disposition-là,
oui.
Que c'est mal ficelé, disons.
On avait essayé justement de encadrer le système pour protéger souvent l'identité des personnes vulnérables, mais évidemment, on est à l'écoute, on va regarder les critiques et les suggestions et comme j'ai dit, on est là pour travailler avec des groupes comme Polly se souvient, justement pour aller de l'avant.
Est-ce que je peux vous demander sur ce qui se passe en Colombie-Britannique, cette idée de pouvoir saisir
Je dois aller. OK.
Bonjour.
Hey, dites-moi. Là, l'ingérence chinoise, les 11 députés, notamment en Ontario, qui auraient reçu de l'argent de Pékin, à quel point ça vous préoccupe, vous?
Je pense que l'enjeu, évidemment, préoccupe l'ensemble des parlementaires et le gouvernement, mais je n'aurais pas grand-chose à ajouter sur ce dossier-là. Je laisse ça aux ministres, aux premiers ministres qui sont avec cet enjeu-là.
Peut-être qu'ils sont assis avec vos caucus, là?
Encore une fois, je laisse ça au premier ministre. Je pense que le premier ministre a répondu sur son voyage et évidemment, on va continuer de regarder ça de très, très près.
C'est pas inquiétant, la démocratie canadienne, de telles allégations, quand même?
Écoutez, je sais que le gouvernement, les instances, on a beaucoup lu et beaucoup vu en termes de reportages et de rapports sur cet enjeu, mais ce n'est pas vers le whip du gouvernement qu'on devrait se diriger. Je sais que les instances responsables sont aux prises avec cet enjeu et je laisse à eux d'en faire rapport.
Monsieur MacKinnon, dans ces traces, vous n'avez pas ajouté des séances en comité. Il y a beaucoup de discussions en ce moment sur la législation.
Je sais que le projet de loi est en comité et je sais qu'il y a toutes sortes de jeux parlementaires, mais j'ignore aujourd'hui où c'est rendu, mais évidemment, la modernisation de la loi sur les langues officielles, c'est une priorité.
Si c'est assez grave pour M. Trudeau pour interpeller le président Xi au G20, pourquoi c'est pas assez grave pour qu'on sache c'est qui les candidats?
Écoutez, il peut y avoir toutes sortes de raisons pour laquelle de l'information et de l'intelligence par rapport à une puissance étrangère ne soit pas divulguée, comme vous le savez sans doute, mais je laisse le soin aux autres et aux instances d'en faire rapport.
Sur C21, l'étude article par article, est-ce qu'il y a encore la possibilité sérieuse là, pour des amendements du côté des libéraux, par exemple sur l'élément de drapeau rouge qui a été critiqué là, par des groupes de défense et de protection pour les femmes?
Encore là, je ne suis pas le ministre responsable, mais je sais que le projet de loi, comme sur C13, est en comité. On va étudier bon nombre de modifications, d'amendements et je suis ça de très, très près.
Madame Lebouthillier, avez-vous l'ingérence de la Chine, là? À quel point ça vous préoccupe dans nos élections? Puis est-ce qu'on devrait savoir c'est qui les candidats qui ont reçu de l'argent?
Bien, écoutez, je pense que Élections Canada a fait l'évaluation, puis ont considéré que la dernière élection était sécuritaire. Ça fait que moi, je vais me fier sur...
Sécuritaire, parce qu'ils auraient pu gagner, ces gens-là. Ils n'ont pas gagné.
Écoutez, le travail a été fait par Élections Canada, puis je me fie là, sur leurs compétences.
Ça vous dérange pas, ça?
Just a moment. Okay. I want to ask about Pierre Poilievre said to stop finding federal injection sites. I just want to get your thoughts on that particular.
It's totally irresponsible that for 10 years we suffered through the conservative approach to 4 pillars in drug policy internationally. There's prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and enforcement. For 10 years, they took the harm reduction out, and we are only now building back that harm reduction arm, which is saving lives. Since we have way more to do, but since 2017, 41,000 overdoses have been reversed in the safe consumption sites. This is hugely important.
Mr. Poilievre seems to imply that safe supply is the cause of all those overdoses and those people who are homeless.
There's no evidence to that, and for years we have been having managed alcohol programs. We've had methadone, Suboxone, Sublocade, and now there are doctors who want to prescribe other medications in terms of medication-assisted therapy. And so that will be one of the conversations we'll have this afternoon with the safe supply community. These are physicians doing what they know their patients need to do in order to keep them alive. In that I've been now saying for almost 20 years, there is no recovery model for people who are dead. We have to meet people where they are. And this is, it's an ideology that is totally misguided, and it's just upsetting. They need to talk to the moms from Moms Stop the Harm who've lost a loved one. Some of the construction workers and mining workers who were denied their pain medication and then went to the street to get their pain medication and died. So this is, I'm very, very disappointed.
Should we fear anything? Because, I mean, for Insight, for instance, it went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court refused the conservative approach.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but I
is
also...
there really something at risk here, or is just talk from Mr. Poilievre?
I think that's a very important point. But even since Insight, to go and visit, that wandering down, awfulizing, is not compassionate. This is National Addictions Awareness Week. These people were hurt either physically or psychically and are using their medicine to be able to get onto a good path to numb their pain. From Insight is On-Site. A whole bunch of people who are there at the safe consumption site then go upstairs and are able to begin to get on a better path. So I think that this just is irresponsible, populist nonsense, and it's just. I think all of the evidence shows what we're doing is not enough. We've got to go further, but it is saving lives, and I think a lot of us are furious.
But he's saying what
about testing? Because we talk a little bit about inside, but what about testing? It means Health Canada exemption. Can you update us?
Sure. We are increasing the ability for our drug testing labs to be able to do a better job on the harm reduction side of it. At the moment, our drug testing labs have been set up mainly for the police to be able to get the bad guys. But in us moving up the harm reduction capacity for the drug testing labs, that's important in terms of the big testing labs. The small ones, like in some of the smaller communities, are unable to test for things like carfentanil because the molecule is so small that you could have a negative test and somebody can die. So I think testing is important in the strips and all the things that people are doing. But I think that eventually we have to go to pharmaceutical grade, a regulated supply.
Can we just get a little
for everyone, or what do you mean by that, regulated grade supply?
So what, like it is with methadone, Suboxone, Sublocade, what's happening now is with Dilaudid. Some of the doctors are prescribing Dilaudid. My Safe program in the downtown east side and in Yukon is, people have their prescription in the vending machine. They put their hand on it and they get their prescription at regular intervals. There are many innovative and creative things that are happening across the country that is with a pharmaceutical grade regulated supply, as we have with alcohol, cannabis, all of the other medications that people use.
Can we just get a small update on, I think with British Columbia, a lot to...
Yeah. So we hope...
As another question, is there other city or other city in Canada ask for the same thing at British Columbia?
Yes, I think we're going to, obviously we've had a request from Toronto, and with the election, we now can get sort of back to work, but our officials have been working all the time in terms of trying to find an approach for Toronto. Montreal, we think, will come. There's certainly Edmonton, Calgary, there's much interest also in Saskatchewan. So the BC model is we are now working with them on choosing all the indicators. So public health indicators, but also public safety indicators. The places that have, say, the MySafe vending machine, you watch petty crime come down. So there are many things that we want to make sure that we're not feeding into any adverse consequence of again, the decrim for small amounts for personal use.
On Montreal, they ask you or you approached it?
So we have an application from Toronto that we're working with them. For the other municipalities, we have an expression of interest.
Montreal expressed interest, as you said. Do you wish them to apply?
No, I think...
Do you think that the Go government will be open to that?
Well, I think that the thing about Toronto, with BC, if we're going to move people from the criminal justice system to the health and social services system, the resources have to be there, and that's why the agreement with the province of British Columbia is so good. They've got great data, and they are ramping up their health and social services. So for people to look at what that application looked like in order to be successful is what the other jurisdictions are looking at. Look at what the BC application looked like in order to be successful, and then how do we build a system that will have that evaluation and research for us to be absolutely sure that there's no unintended consequences and that it's working.
Do you have information that Montreal would be ready, would have enough information?
I've only heard about the expression of interest, but we are more than happy to work with them on what it would take. Well, it's interesting. It's a good question. In Toronto, it came from the Board of Health, in that they had decided they didn't necessarily need it to go to City Council, that it could just be done from the Board of Health. In one of the Saskatchewan jurisdictions, it's been the police that have expressed an interest, and yet we haven't seen their application.
About Montreal, who has expressed that?
It was the City Council. Yeah. Well, I think it's a matter of us doing the kind of work that we need to with them to be able to see what is in the British Columbia proposal. Well, again, I was asked the same question at the beginning of the British Columbia application. It takes as long as it takes for us to get it into the kind of shape that we can approve. Okay.
Wasn't there a request made by Montreal a few years ago?
I don't know that, but I do know that over the last couple of years that we've seen that expression of interest. We'd love to work with them.
Obviously, Mr. Poilievre released his video yesterday.
Yeah.
There's some question about the veracity of some of the things that he was saying. So, what do you make of his video yesterday?
You know, first of all, my heart's with all the families that have lost loved ones to overdose, and there's a lot of families that have lost loved ones to overdose. In fact, most people watching this news story or this clip would know someone in their community who's lost a family member. And for me, that's where all of this conversation needs to begin. It needs to begin with a compassion for the families and the people who are using substances. This is something that I've worked on for most of my professional career. And, you know, substance use and problematic substance use is complicated. But at the end of the day, if we don't have tools in place for people to reach out to, either while they're actively using or when they want to get better, and they die instead on the street, then there's no recovery possible. There's this incredible group of advocates across the country called Moms Stop the Harm. You may have heard of them. They're essentially mothers and fathers of children, young people, and sometimes older people who have lost their battle with substance use, and who advocate for compassionate and evidence-based drug policy that includes things like harm reduction, making sure that people can get access to clean supplies. You know, I used to run a shelter, and I'd say to the staff that were working at the shelter, when someone comes to the window to ask for a clean needle, that's a health-seeking behavior. That means that person hopes that they're going to live long enough to recover, and that when they recover, they also won't have an infectious disease like hepatitis C or HIV. It also protects the community. You know, have less infectious disease in the community is overall a net positive, and so that's why public health has advocated for things like access to clean supplies like needles.
Seems Mr. Poilievre's main problem, pardon me, is with the safe supply. Is that an absolutely necessary part of harm reduction for drugs?
Well, it absolutely is. Imagine if you're injecting substances and you're using a dirty needle. Immediately you have a new risk. Besides the risk of the substance that you're consuming, whether or not it's pure or tainted, now you have the risk of using a needle that's contaminated with somebody else's blood that may introduce HIV or hepatitis C or other infections into your system. So harm reduction is not just about you know, the prevention of disease. It's also about the opportunity when someone comes to the window, in our case, to ask for clean supplies, to say, do you have enough to eat? How are you feeling today? Have you seen a doctor lately? Is there a way that we can connect you to services? That doesn't happen every single engagement, but it gives a point of contact with a caring organization or supplier of clean needles, often public health, community health centers, homeless shelters, even food banks sometimes, to connect with a person who sometimes doesn't just feel unseen, they feel unwanted, they feel shamed. And that shame is such a prevention for people to reach out and get that help. When you feel that ashamed of yourself, it's very hard to reach out. So that point of contact between someone who's giving something useful is a really important conversation place.
What do you make of Mr. Poilievre's choice of location to shoot his video with using the Crab Park tent village in the background?
You know, anytime that we're using poverty or substance use as a backdrop to make a point, we're re-stigmatizing people who oftentimes have no other solution but to live in that particular situation. It reminds me of when I was a young person living in modest means myself, and you know, you have friends from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, but when someone comes to your living room and you don't really have a lot of money, you know, there's often that shame response, right? And so to use people in that way, in what arguably one could say is the darkest moments of their hours as a backdrop, I think is insensitive. It's certainly not reflective of trying to promote some sense of dignity or trying to have the compassion that I think he was purportedly trying to just express in that video. Thank you very much.
Êtes-vous déçu de la décision de la FIFA de menacer de sanctions les athlètes qui voulaient porter un brassard multicolore?
Bien, évidemment, les organisations sportives, ce qu'on voit, les fédérations internationales, etc., c'est qu'on cherche toujours à séparer le sport et la politique. Mais évidemment, en prenant une décision comme celle-là, ça demeure une décision politique de la part de l'organisation de restreindre la liberté d'expression. Je trouve ça dommage. Je pense qu'il y a moyen de faire en sorte que les compétitions sportives peuvent se dérouler de façon solidaire, fraternelle, bref, avec tout ce que le sport demande, mais en même temps de permettre une certaine liberté d'expression. Ben, oui, ou une décision politique mal avisée, là, je dirais. Ben, politique dans le sens où il y a des athlètes qui souhaitent pouvoir exprimer leur solidarité, entre autres avec la communauté LGBT. Et malheureusement, la FIFA a décidé de restreindre cette expression-là. Alors, je trouve ça extrêmement dommage.
Mais comment vous l'expliquez qu'on a le droit de dire non discrimination en anglais?
Yes. Sports organizations are trying to separate politics and sport, but these types of decisions are also a political decision to restrain the freedom of expression of athletes that want to share their solidarity with the LGBTQ community. So I feel like it's unfortunate. Athletes should have the right to express their opinion and at the same time protect the sport environment and make sure that all athletes can compete fairly.
Comment comprenez-vous qu'un brassard multicolore est considéré comme politique et qu'un brassard noir est considéré comme non politique?
Bien, je vais laisser la FIFA là, expliquer cette dimension-là. C'est eux qui ont pris cette décision-là. Ben oui, de dire un brassard noir qui dit pas de discrimination ou un brassard multicolore qui cible en particulier la communauté LGBT Q2, il y a certainement des contradictions là, dans la décision de la FIFA.
Opposition leader for what is it, non-lethal military aid for the 500 Belarusian fighters who are fighting on the Ukrainian side.
I had a wonderful meeting with her on the weekend when I was at the Halifax International Security Forum, and I very much enjoyed our conversation and will continue to work with her. Thank you.